Welcome to the Faith Seeking Understanding Pod. This is Luis Jovel from Melbourne, Australia, bringing you the second episode of this pod or podcast, however you want to call it. And we're going to talk about something that is very unique or very fundamental to understanding the Christian faith, which is the Bible, where it all starts. The Bible looks like an awful long book. This is the reason that usually stops people from reading it. Maybe you're one of those people who see the Bible as a thick, very thick book that is not worth even to open it and have a peek inside. But when you think of it, if you enjoy good literature, you enjoy reading the Bible. It has poetry, mystery, murder, betrayal, heroic stories, love, and sex. No good story can lack sex. Taboo subjects, incest, military endeavors, and science fiction. That's right, science fiction. And if you stick to this podcast, you will get to hear about it. The Bible has all of those subjects and many more. Sure, some of them are boring, like long genealogies, but you can always skip them in the first read. But sooner or later, you will find out that you had to read those in order to understand certain parts. When you hear the word the Bible, it means different things to different people. Let's start with the Jews, who were the ones who wrote it, like 98% of it, and even wrote parts that other Jews did not later recognize as part of the Bible, meaning the New Testament. For the Jews, the Bible is composed of what Christians call the Old Testament. Their Bible, which is also the Christians' Bible, but only about 2/3 of it. It has 24 books, in contrast to the 39 books found in the Christian Old Testament. I know, it's confusing, but stick to this podcast, and I assure you that you will get it eventually. I just want to highlight that when both Jews and Christians mention the Old Testament, they are talking of the same book from the outside, but a different book, at least in arrangement, from the inside. And don't get me started with the deuterocanonical books. More of that later. Anyway, well, Christians divide the Old Testament in 5 sections. More of that when we talk about the Christians. The Jews divide their Bible into 3 sections. Torah, which comprises of the first 5 books of the Bible, also known as the 5 books of Moses. Then come the Nevi'im, or the prophets, which is in itself subdivided into 3 sections. And finally, Ketubim, which is translated as writings, which cover the rest of the books, including poetic books and some books that chronologically were written last. We Christians call the Old Testament, well, the Old Testament. But Jews make from these 3 sections a new name for their Bible, the acronym Tanakh, which is made up of the first 2 Hebrew letters of each section mentioned above. I know in English they don't seem to make sense, but hey, that's transliteration. Live with it. The Tanakh covers a period of time of about 1,000 years, while the New Testament covers a period of about 100 years. No wonder it's so much shorter. Now, the Christian Old Testament, remember I said it had 50 more books more than the Tanakh? You will be surprised. They are the same books, just arranged differently. An example is that while the Christian Old Testament usually divides the historical books into 2, the Tanakh keeps them as 1. Another difference is the arrangement of sections of the Old Testament. We saw that the Tanakh is divided into 3 with some subdivisions. The Christian Old Testament is divided into 5. First comes the Book of Moses as in the Tanakh, but that's about the same order you're going to get. Second, after that comes the historical books that narrate the history of Israel from the time God gets them into the promised land to the time they are booted out of the land by God, and finally, when they are brought back by God to the land. Crazy, I know. 3, poetry, books, where you find some good advice as well as some sexual foreplay. I told you, the Bible has many interesting parts. 4, major prophets. These guys are major because they wrote longer books. 5, finally, minor prophets. Don't underestimate the power of small books. Hey, we have the great story of Jonah and the whale in the book of Jonah. Wonder if as many people know stories from the major prophets. These little ones pull up their weight very well against the big guys. But not all Christians accept the same number of books in the Old Testament. No one accepts less than 39, according to the Christian tradition, which in a sense follows up to that point the Hebrew canon. But some, such as Roman Catholics and the Orthodox Church, accept those books found in the Greek translation known as the Septuagint or LXX. This Greek translation first appeared around 200 before Christ and includes 6 more books, some historical, some poetical, and some addition to books as an extra chapter of the book of Daniel, one of the major prophets, but who also wrote a short book, yet still included in the major prophets anyway. I don't know how. Anyway, the Septuagint was larger book-wise. The Septuagint had been the church Bible until the 4th and 5th century, until Jerome, a leader of the church, translated the Old Testament from the Hebrew, not the Greek. He still kept those extra books, but this was picked up by the Protestant Reformation in the 16th century, and the Reformers more or less ditched the books, calling them apocryphal or of suspect origin, and relegated them to devotional reading, but having nothing to do with Christian doctrine or belief. Still, some other Christians, such as the Ethiopic Orthodox Church, accept some books designated as pseudepigrapha, or books falsely attributed to Old Testament people, such as the book in question, the Book of Enoch. The Book of Enoch is a book composed during the Second Temple period or near and after the time of Jesus. Enoch is an Old Testament character, and the book takes after his name to provide a bit more authority to what's said in the book. Hey, a man who was taken to heaven and never died must know something and would be worthwhile reading what he has to say, right? Well, that's a short intro to what the whole Bible for the Jews, or what they call Tanakh, and what the Christians call the Old Testament. I hope that even this rundown of history is exciting to listen and would at least get you interested in looking at the table of contents of a Bible near you. And hey, that book was not even called Bible but until the 3rd century, and it was in Greek. And the name Bible, as we have it in English today, comes from the 14th century. Before that, it was called in English Bibliodice. Now, that's something you can brag to your friends next time you want to look and sound smart. Well, next time we will talk about how the New Testament was put together. Like I said, these are just brief introductions to entice you to pick up a Bible and have a peek into it. You may be surprised how much it has influenced Western culture, with sayings as, "Can a leper change its spots?" taken from the major prophets, specifically Jeremiah chapter 13, verse 23. Or, as mentioned above, the story of Jonah and the whale that was not actually a whale, but a fish. But we're stuck with the whale forever, I guess. Don't forget to rate this podcast. If you are hearing it on YouTube, give us a thumbs up and leave us a very positive review. If you are listening in iTunes, give it a 5 stars and a positive review as well. If you're listening on Anchor FM, where this podcast lives, share it with friends, spread the word, make it known to the ends of the earth. I hope you have enjoyed this podcast. And until next time, keep seeking understanding.